I also want to thank our sponsors. I myself am a Dell user, Intel and NVIDIA. Absolutely love their cards and products for all of my Adobe classes. So without any further ado, let me go ahead and share my screen with you. I want to share my PowerPoint. I'm just going to go through, I'm going to start this. And the first thing that I want to talk about is codecs. So if you are a drone pilot, you're shooting, please mind which codec it is that you're using. The difference in most DJI drones between 264 and H.265 is that H.264 is going to be an 8-bit codec, while the H.265 is going to be a 10-bit codec. Also, the H.265 is going to let you shoot in logarithmic, which will give you a wider range of options when you're doing color correction in post. Of course, some of the higher end drones shoot in ProRes and in RAW. So, let's go to the next one.
One note I'd like to throw in there real quick. Is
okay.
That, yeah, if you're shooting in log, first of all, always ask your client what they want.
Right.
They may have specific things to go with other stuff they're shooting. But also, if you're shooting in log, some of the DJI drones will automatically kick your ISO up to like 400 or 500. So you want to be cognizant of that as well. Just take that into consideration with your settings as well.
Right. So it's going to be the same with the frame rates and frame sizes. Always ask the client what it is that they want. And in here, just mind that most of the DJI drones are not going to really shoot at 30 frames per second. They're all shooting at 2997. So, just mind the codec, mind the frame rate and the frame size. All right, Mike, anything to add here?
No, sounds good.
All right, good. So let's keep on going on the filters. If you are a drone pilot, I'm going to recommend that you have a set of filters, not only ND, but also polarizing. If you are shooting anywhere near the water, I highly recommend that you have a polarizing filter. It's going to make a huge difference on how your video looks. And we're also going to touch on this a little bit when we talk about hyperlapses.
And you should always also have something on your lens. I mean, if you're a photographer, you're familiar with this, but a lot of drone pilots are out there shooting with nothing, not even a clear filter that comes with the camera.
Right.
And that is a great way to ruin your lens, because you never want to actually clean the actual lens if you have to. And if you got a filter on there, it's easier if you scratch the filter or get it dirty or ruin it somehow. To buy a new filter, but you can't, if some of these cameras with the built-in lenses, you're going to have to buy a whole new camera, or if you get
a whole new gimbal, a whole new everything, right? Might as well buy a new drone.
Small price to pay. Yeah.
Yeah, right. All right, so let's start with hyperlapses. I'm going to minimize this.
I want to make a little comment here. Our video is kind of processed through PowerPoint. It's a little steppy. The actual video is actually smooth. So
right, and not only because of the PowerPoint, but because we are presenting in Zoom. So if it looks choppy, it's because of the
frame rate.
The connection, the PowerPoint, everything else. The original videos all are very, very smooth. So when it comes to hyperlapses, what we're talking about is the same as a time lapse, but the camera moves. That makes it a hyperlapse. So one of the things that I'm going to suggest when it comes to hyperlapses is that if you do want a little bit of a motion blur happening in here. So you really want to set that shutter speed to a little bit slower than you would be doing it if you were not doing a hyperlapse. So I'm going to suggest that on top of doing all of your preps, you actually put an ND filter in there that is a higher stop than again you would be using if you were not doing a hyperlapse, so that you can have that slower shutter speed. So this is also a hyperlapse taken from the ground. Just because you do a hyperlapse from the air doesn't mean that you can't do it from the ground as well. And yes, you can use some drones, not all. This one was taken though with a DSLR. So when it comes to hyperlapses, whether you're doing an orbit or you're doing, hold on, let me go back a little bit, or you're doing a straight line or anything like that, make sure that you keep in mind where the drone is going any kind of obstacles that may or may not be there, and that you also keep in mind wind, you keep in mind any kind of turbulence, and always keep the subject where you need to keep it. Things in the water look great for hyperlapses, and you do want to have that little bit of motion blur. All right, so I'm gonna go on. And Mike, this one is yours.
Yeah, this is actually Inner Harbor in Baltimore, and this is a good example of making sure you know where your light's coming from. As drone pilots, we can't 99% of the time control our light. We're not setting lights and flying our drone in the light. We're actually dependent on what Mother Nature gives us. So make sure you do a scouting trip, and make sure you know you've done it recently in this season. Of course, the light, the quality of light, the angle of light, when it comes up and down, of course, all changes, and especially the quality. Summertime in the DC area where we are is notorious for like hazy skies. So you may have shot something a month ago and you go back out and you're like, what the heck's going on here? The light's in the same position. So be cognizant of all that, the light, where it's coming from, the quality of light, and the season that you're shooting in. You know, and schedule your shoots from there. So
right, and I wanted to add one more thing while I go to the next slide, and that is that if you are not in a position of going scouting to the location in which you're going to be shooting, Google Earth gives you great representation on light at time of day. So you can actually calculate that fairly well with Google Earth.
Yep. Here's another good one. This one is it's a good example of using light reflections and shadows and actually backlight to your advantage. And one thing with shooting sunrises, sunsets, anything that's highly backlit like this one is you have to remember and tell the client that you're not necessarily going to get the subject. So if you're shooting a sunrise or sunset, and our next slide is a good example of this, you are not shooting, you're either shooting the subject or you're shooting the sunrise. You can't be shooting both, of course. So if you advance the slide here, I think we have a sunrise.
Yeah, we do. This is actually a sunrise as well. And here I just want to add, I mean, this is a beautiful shot. This is one that Mike did a couple of years ago, and I absolutely love it. Don't be afraid of shooting into the sun. This is the same, kind of almost the same time of day, maybe 15, 20 minutes later, but from the other side. Look how well lit those buildings are. And I think this is one of yours, Mike, as well.
Yeah, I don't know.
You know, it's been so long, I don't remember.
But we like, yeah, and when we like to play with reflections. If you notice, a lot of times with sunrises and sunsets and high sun problems is that you're thinking, oh, there's too much reflection or there's not enough light or something. But you can actually get, you can play with the sun and get the sunrise and sunset as a reflection in this building, for instance. This one, the sun's a little bit too high for that, but you're still seeing reflections of other buildings and the sun, not only in the building, but also in the water. You know, the lower you get, the better those reflections and the better those streams of light are. So play with your altitude, your time of day, and and of course your exposure to get to find what you're trying to convey in your shot. So you can do a whole lot with these things, whether it's backlit, whether it's you know, using the sun as your source light, or whether it's backlit. Just play around with it.
Right. So I just want to add in here that none of these shots is particularly difficult, technically speaking. So it's what Mike said. It's really shots where we plan them because we plan the time of day. We were there before sunrise. So yes, I know you don't like getting up early, but for some things it's more than worth it to do. And then it's just a very, very short pan. And it's really just adjusting gimbals, but it's mainly just shooting at the right time of day.
This is one of my favorites. This was actually, there's a number of ways you could have done this shot. And what we did was, of course, the gimbal's straight down. And this is at sunrise as well. And I chose to, make the lines on the left and the sand off, not straight, because it's more interesting that way. And there's a number of things you could do with that. If you had straight lines, if you're moving with straight lines, you got to keep, you kind of tend to need to keep the drone straight and on a certain path, or people get kind of, your mind doesn't like it. But if you're that's if you're trying to keep it perfectly straight. Here, it's off to the side. It kind of divides the frame and draws your attention to the waves. And the time of day, actually, the way the early sun is hitting the waves, it's the top of the waves you see, and the rest of the waves are dark. And that's because of the time of day. A little bit later, you wouldn't see these waves as well. It would be a lot flatter. And the same with the sun itself. The sun, the sand, the footsteps in the sand are highlighted by the time of day. A little bit later, and that would all be gone. You really wouldn't see those footsteps in the sand.
Right. So I love the composition of this one. I love the breaking waves, the colors, and everything in this particular shot. So absolutely. Let's talk about using foreground objects. Sometimes what you're going to shoot, like in the case of this yurt, it's not the most attractive thing in the world. To fly the drone in here was very challenging because you can see the woods, you can see that the trees are actually quite close to each other. So I actually put the drone far enough behind and did a partial orbit to get this particular shot. And I really thought that the trees on the foreground gave it that much more character. It actually increases the illusion of movement, and it makes the shot that much more interesting. This one is one of yours, Mike.
Yeah, this is Annapolis, but again, it's a reveal, but
Right.
it's from a relatively high altitude. With drones, you want to think of them as jibs, and you want to you want a lot of foreground. So as we get to the lake here, you lose a lot of foreground, and the interest is gone. But to reveal the lake and to get close to the trees, even though we're high up, it adds that dynamic feeling to the shot. So you have a feeling of motion and a very nice dynamic feel to the shot. And then you reveal the lake here.
Right, the lake, the boats, everything, that little entrance there, just very, very nice. This one was a shot that I did in New Jersey. So I was in New Jersey, but obviously living at Manhattan. And one of the things that I wanted to do to make this a little bit more dynamic was to use that one building as a foreground object. So it really looks like the drone is getting very, very close to the building. In reality, I was working with two visual observers. The drone was actually a ways from the building. So at no moment did we put the drone or anybody in danger. But it resulted for a very dynamic shot. Manhattan is so far away that had that building not been there, the sense of movement would have all been gone. In this one, this was almost a shot of really opportunity. I was shooting a building behind these two, and I was in DC, and to be able to fly in DC is quite challenging because it's all flight restricted areas. And in this particular case, since I already had the permit and all of that, I decided to just kind of make the two buildings into foreground of kind of like a tunnel, right? So that I could at the end go and reveal as much as the National Park as I could do. So in this case, I used those two buildings as my foreground objects. It was a little bit challenging because it was windy and the drone itself was not flying that straight. But I think that I even with the lateral motion a little bit, that the shot was successful.
This one was another one where the lake itself was not as interesting because there's nothing there. So I found a dock and I flew, off the dock, and I started at the beginning of the dock and flew the length of the dock. And basically it gave a little bit of motion and interest to the lake. Again, using foreground to enhance the shot.
Absolutely. And I love the long shadows on those pylons of the dock.
This one is one of my favorite. This is Annapolis, Maryland. And basically, this is one of the ones that are a very good example of shooting a sunrise. The client wanted to shoot sunrise. He didn't know what he wanted. And I explained the whole thing about you either shoot the sunrise or you shoot the what's being lit by the sunrise, which Annapolis is right behind us. This is the harbor. And you want some foreground as you're going up because, you know, this is a really wide shot and you need something going on. If I did this again, I'd probably get closer to the trees because you lose a lot in the immediate foreground because there's not a whole lot of a whole lot of interest there because it's all dark. Of course, done on purpose, the silhouette. But you do have the water, a little bit of the water reflections there, the pylons from the pier, and then as you come up, of course, you see the sun, and you have the reflections on the sun. Then you have the paddle boarders going through as well. It's always good in a sunrise shot like this to have something trailing through, whether it's the light trail or something, or whether it's a whatever it is like that. You want something to go through if you can, or kind of go into that because it gives it a little more interest, of course. As much movement as possible.
Yeah, it creates a vanishing point. And, I know that you plan to have those paddle boarders in there just to give it a more sense of movement. So, yeah, I know that was completely planned.
Another example of using, backlit foreground objects is this one here, Lighthouse in Cambridge, Maryland. And basically you want to, the sun itself is not interesting. So you want your foreground objects to add interest to it and also reveal the sunrise and have it go in and out as this one here is doing. And you catch those rays. And I didn't use any kind of a sparkle filter, whatever they call on this. This was basically a polarizer and the sunrise. It's just nice the way that the sun pops out. So you're thinking, oh, it's kind of what's going on here. You see the clouds, you see a little bit of the lighthouse, and then the sun is revealed. And this one, of course, it's kind of revealing the lighthouse a little bit more, the whole shapes and things. But it helps you, if you think foreground, to really be able to use your sun in that respect. So you're not just shooting the sun with nothing in it.
Right. And on this one,
sorry,
yeah,
there's a question from John saying, how many ND stops did you use for this shot?
That's a good question.
I don't know. I think I probably, on sunrises, I'll start off with a clear lens, and then usually I'll go to a 4 to be able to let it last longer, to be able to use the sun longer. So this one, I'm pretty sure I had a 4 on.
Mm-hmm. So in here, I just want to add one thing. This is one of Mike's shots. And about 6 months later, after he did this one, I happened to be doing something different at this very same location. And I did arrive at sunrise, and I tried to recreate this shot because I'm like, well, he can't be the only one having a nice shot there. So, and I couldn't do it. The sun was in a completely different place, and it did not allow me to do this particular shot with a silhouette. So I want to emphasize that the time of year matters, and it matters a lot, because again, I could not redo this shot.
And that's a good point. If you don't, that brings up actually 2 points. If you don't keep logs, if you're a drone pilot and you don't have logs of everything you do, flight times and locations and times, start doing that. You want to be able to document how many hours you have logged, and that's the only way to do it. I mean, I have paper logs still. I don't use digital. A lot of people use digital.
Right.
However you want to do it, make sure you write it down. And then to Louisa's point, you could go back and say, oh, well, that was in November. That's why I'm shooting in June now. Yeah, the sun's going to be a different way. And you can talk to the client. You can tell the client that, like, maybe they saw some of your work and they say, hey, we want to do that same shot, or we want to repeat it. You can remind them that, hey, this is a different time of year. We'll never be able to get this shot, or we have to play out with something else. Come up with a different solution. But that all plays into logging your shots. And I don't take it this far, but some people even take it as far as to putting the actual exposure information in their logs.
You know, that's a good idea. But if you take stills, at least in the stills, I know it happens for sure. All of that information is saved in metadata, so people can go back and look at that. So, but let's go on.
This is another one that basically uses foreground. We're revealing the bridge. We started out on the inlet, and then as we move back, you see that the bridge is there. And you know, and the boat going through. Another way of doing it, of course, would be underneath, so that you are under the bridge, and it still reveals over you. It just wasn't. This was, you know, I was shooting here all day pretty much. And I was waiting for the bridge to open, and I would rush over there and try and get the shot. So it was somewhat of a shot of opportunity. So I was, you know, you have to think of these things in terms of what your opportunity is and what you can use. In this case, flying over the bridge, I thought was a better option. If the bridge were down lower, maybe we could fly under it and have it come up over us. But there are just a number of things you can do. But these are good things because they just add a whole lot of interest to the shot.
Mm-hmm. I agree. The bridge came so close to I know in reality, the drone wasn't so close, but I mean, in the video, the bridge, when it's being revealed, is very, very close to the drone. And that adds a lot of interest. All right. So let's talk about standard shot sequences. So these are kind of the shots that I am going to recommend, that we are going to recommend, that every time you go out, you know, just bring a list with you and do all these shot sequences. If you have all or most of these different shot sequences, chances are that you will be able to edit a piece together for your client without any problems. And, you know, that just leads to you being happy, the client being happy, and, you know, more jobs and, you know, more opportunities come your way.
And
so
just as a note, it's not easy a lot of times to find some of these shots. So finding reveals and sunrise, things like as Luisa said, you need to scout a lot of times, or you need to think about what's going on. You have to find these things. You may get to a location and the client's like, hey, I need this, you know, I need a shot. Usually the clients are pretty vague. They leave it up to us. They're like, hey, I need a shot of my solar panels. Okay, I mean, you ask a few questions, what's important, you find out what's important to them, and then you work around that, and you add these shots to it, and you figure out what foreground can I find that's interesting and what's relevant to the shot that enhances what you know, in my view, is my shot, and then the client's needs, fulfills the client's needs.
Right. So this one, I won't go too long on it. It's simply a hover. The drone is just still. Basically, what is providing the framing is this old tattered flag. And I thought it was very interesting to add titles, to add graphics, their logo, a beginning or an ending frame. So hover, never underestimate the power of a hover.
This one was Baltimore. They have some nice row houses in Baltimore, all over the city. You know, this is just a ped up with a pedestal down, with a gimbal down. So basically, instead of just moving the drone up, you're also moving the gimbal down. A little bit harder than just moving the drone up, of course, because it's a coordinated effort. And depending on your drone, if it's a one-person operation, it takes a lot of practice to do this. But if you notice, there's a tree on the right, so that gives it a little foreground. There's some cars passing. The thing is, the focal point, of course, is the row houses. You're keeping the gimbal on the row houses.
Right.
Backup reveal. This one is kind of fun. The actual shot is a lot longer. We actually started under the bridge on the other guys on the other side, and we revealed this guy here. And it's kind of cool because you think, oh, the shot's done. Just as you're getting bored with the shot, this guy appears. You reveal the guy who's fishing here. You know, challenge. It's a real challenge because you have well, one, a lot of obstacles, but also the reflections from the water. It's a real exposure challenge because you're kind of in a chasm here, in a valley. So trying to get him lit and not overexposing the water, it just, you know, it's a time of day thing. It's a positioning thing. It's all really it's a lot harder than it looks. So if you're doing these kind of things, make sure you take that into consideration. This guy was a fly fisherman I got in touch with, and I said, I knew what I wanted, the type of shot I wanted. So I called him and he took me to some spots, but I talked to him beforehand. I said, well, are these like, you know, I envision something like this where we need a certain time of day. We kind of lucked out with this because, you know, your window is so small for the light to hit it just right. So another time of year probably would have even been better, coming straight down. It was on the side coming over, but coming straight from either side, we might have had even a better shot on that another time of year. But I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. This one, a head-up reveal, I think, or
Yes.
just a reveal. Again, you start on one thing and then you just come up and you reveal the harbor and back. So depending on how you do this, you can also reverse some of these shots. You may start on the harbor and then you know, come down and reveal the lighthouse. These are just all basic shots. This one's pretty simple to do. There's no gimbal movement at all. So it in contrast to the Baltimore row house shot where it was an up gimbal down, this one the drone just simply moves up. So you're not focused on the lighthouse in this respect. It's your beginning interest, and then your actual focus of interest to this is what's beyond the lighthouse. So that's why you're not gimbaling down and keeping it on the lighthouse, of course. You're just moving the drone up. Relatively.
Right. So I want to add a little bit on this one, that many a times if I'm going to do an up reveal like this, in which I'm not going to move the gimbal, I'm going to prep the shot by bringing the drone up to where I want to end, and I'm going to adjust the gimbal with the drone up. Then I'm going to lower the drone back down and then start the shot and then just move back up. I already know that the gimbal is going to be where I need it to be when I am in the higher altitude in the drone. So this one is the same as an ascent, but going down. So same thing. I knew that I wanted to start up and come down and reveal kind of like a wide shot of this particular lighthouse. So this particular place is in Cambridge, Maryland, has some really interesting docks that kind of sort of frame the image for you. So I did the same thing. I went to where I wanted to end and I framed things the way that I wanted. So left and right, I panned it to where I needed to pan. I adjusted the up and down, so the tilt of the gimbal, and then I went up and then came back down to do this particular shot. So none of them are particularly difficult when it comes to drone technique. So the camera technique, adjusting the exposure, the frame rate, the frame size, the shutter speed, all of those things are in one category. And then there's the category of actually flying the drone. This so far, not that remarkable. It's just coming down. The ground reveal, on the other hand, requires a little bit more skill. And I'm talking about flying the drone, because the shot is starting with the drone close to the ground, the gimbal tilted down so that it's getting the ground. I did this on water, but it works on anything, at all. And then you move forward. That gives the illusion of rapid motion because you're pointing down to grass, sand, gravel, whatever it is, or water. And then the drone goes up and so does the gimbal. So you are using a 3-finger technique to create this effect. If you're using mode 2 with your drone, which is what most people use, your right hand is going, the stick is going up, so the drone is moving forward. The left hand, the stick is going up because you're going up, and wherever you have the gimbal, I usually have it on my left index finger, is slowly going up. And that coordinated effort is not something that can be done without any practice. So if this is one of the shots that you want to accomplish, I recommend just practicing this in your backyard, in the park, wherever you can fly your drone, and do it several times until you feel comfortable enough with how your fingers should feel. There is muscle memory for musical instruments and also for flying drones, for pretty much anything. This one I took in Iceland, so I'm so glad this is an Icelandic conference. So absolutely love Iceland, and I took this one. And this is a pan, but you know, and I'm calling it a pan because it is. But in addition to that, I'm also yawing the gimbal to the left. So I'm panning right and yawing to the left. So it's very much a partial orbit. These were taken manually, but there are some drones like my Mavic 2 Pro that will do this automatically. And then you can change the speed, you can change, you can change all of those things. But this was done manually. If you want to do it manually, and I do recommend that you can do it manually so you don't have to program it, it also takes practice. Because
also,
it takes, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was also going to say that this, as opposed to a straight pan, this has a little more interest because you're able to keep the boats, if you notice, as you partial orbit here, you're able to keep the boats in there. So I can look at the boats, but the shot's still moving. If you had a pan, you wouldn't see the boats. You would see the boats and then they would be gone. And also visually, right, it's very jarring with the drone, just the way the drone works. And a lot of gimbals don't, and cameras on these drones, depending on your drone, they don't handle a pan, a pure pan really that well. So you want to make sure you fly and pan at the same time. I mean, I kind of make that a standard procedure, unless something actually calls for a strict pan.
Right. So I'm glad you brought up the boats, keeping the boats in the center. What I was thinking more of anything was including that mountain in the top left. That if I had done a straight pan, I wouldn't have gotten it, So I wanted to start in the buildings and the boats and then slowly reveal that mountain there in the back. And again, this does require practice. I'm going to recommend that you really practice, just like if it were a musical instrument. So my background is in music. I've been a violinist for, my God, 50 years. I started when I was 7. And the muscle memory, the practicing, the control of your fingers, the pressure, all of that, it's very, very important. And I'm going to recommend that you practice with that in mind. It's not all, let's go fast, let's go high, and let's avoid, no. Let's actually get what we need, and we can only do those things if we have control of our fingers, of our hands when we're flying.
And also, this is it looks pretty simple. This shot is really difficult. I have a lot of problems flying this shot because there are a lot of things that are happening. If you ever done any of these where you're trying to do, it's like a partial circle, okay? So it's the same as if you're keeping something, if maybe you're focused on the mountain, you're trying to do a partial orbit on that way. Which is a little bit different, but same kind of technique here. The problem is not only is, you really have to be smooth in your movements and your controls and things, but you're getting, depending on your drone, you're getting a lot of prop wash that is, you can have your sticks in a fairly consistent, you don't have to move them that much, but the problem is you need to compensate for that prop wash, and you have to know what your drone is doing. So you have to, so the more wind that you have during the day, the worse it's going to be as well, because as you turn the drone, you're changing the angle of the wind hitting the drone. So right, that affects it as well. So your drone tries to compensate that, and it screws up your shot. So, there are so many factors that play into the creation of this shot and the capture of this shot that you really have to know, think about it when you're too bad shot to get.
It wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't. Okay. Iceland is generally speaking, when I was there, it was quite windy, but this particular day in this particular town, it wasn't. So I lucked out. So here we go. This is what you were talking about, Mike. This is the partial orbit.
Yeah, and this one, this is put in Bay, Ohio, and it's kind of the same idea, but this one you're trying to keep a point of interest, and this was all done manually. I really don't like the automated features. Some of them are okay. I just learned without them, and I tend to go with them. It's not, you know, it basically, it shows the beauty of the island. It was a really nice harbor, a nice day, flags are flying. Not too bad.
Look at that flag.
But again,
So,
same
you know-
technique. You got to know, you got to be practiced, and you got to realize
Right.
what's going to happen as you fly your drone, so you can hopefully compensate for that.
Right. Right. Absolutely. You know, it's pretty easy. If you can fly it forward, you can fly it backwards, but not because something is easy technically to do. So I'm saying now the opposite, right? Some of them are difficult. This one is not. After you set the camera settings the way that you want them, flying the drone backwards is a piece of cake. So just make sure that there's no obstacles, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But technically speaking, this one is super easy. Not because it's easy doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. This adds a lot to your arsenal, so to speak, of shots, and it's something that you will be able to use when you're putting a piece together for your client.
This is one of my favorite, and this is
Mhm.
what I guess Luisa calls a 3-finger shot. And
It
again,
is.
and I'll tell you why. I mean, basically, you are flying down, what we call a ped down, and you are gimbaling up, and you are moving forward, and you're trying not to fly into the water. So as we go back to the beginning of the shot, it basically what happens is here in the wide shot, it's like you don't really see a whole lot. It's kind of ugly. You got the reflections. Oh, that's nice. But as you ped down, your lighthouse is breaking the horizon, and all of a sudden it becomes the focal point of the shot. So your eyes are drawn to that, and that's accomplished by getting below and looking up, basically. And the only way you do that is to fly down and raise your gimbal. And so it's a very difficult shot to do if you've never done before. I kind of like it. I've done it a lot, and it just never fails to really to do its magic, especially when you have reflections. But again, you have to be careful. You know, you want to fly into the ground, into the water. Water is just kind of different. I've never flown into the ground. I've never flown into the water, almost. But those are the kind of some of the things you have to remember. But it adds, you know, you have the shot. It's looking okay in the beginning. You think, oh, look, there's a lighthouse. And it's like, oh, wow, there's a lighthouse. You see the boat. It just focuses your attention to that point.
Right. It's a great shot. And again, really difficult to do from a technical point of view. So practice.
And on the left, if you look on the left, there was all this stuff that I couldn't get out of the shot. There's this like lift, some kind of boat crane, but it's okay because as I moved down, you don't notice it as much because you're focused on the lighthouse. Anyway. This one is a push reveal, and basically we have this lighthouse and tender's house, whatever, and we go over it and we find the boat in the harbor, in the bay, whatever it is back there. And you know, it works for that. If you have a bigger boat coming by, it works even better. But it also works in the opposite. So you're going in and you push and you go past it. Well, once you're there on the other side, you might as well get the shot coming back, which would, of course, be a pull reveal.
Which is this one. So same thing coming back.
Yeah, it all depends on what you're trying to accomplish. So, of course, the boat's gone here, but it would be nice if you could catch a boat and then reveal the lighthouse. But it depends. I mean, you know, in one sense, maybe you're talking about the lighthouse and then you're talking about the bay. The other one, maybe you're talking about the bay and the lighthouse. I don't know, but you get both of them. If you don't know what, you know, what your writing is or what exactly you're trying to do there, you have both coverage.
You know, Mike, if you go forward, you gotta come back anyway. So might as well get the shot as you're coming back. You know, when you're putting this together.
Louisa, there's an issue with your microphone. You're sounding a little.
There's an issue with my microphone.
It sounds like maybe the battery. Do you have a battery in it?
No, I'm using the mic from my. Hold on, I'm gonna switch mics.
Okay.
Give me 1 second. I'm gonna use this.
So this was. Yeah,
That's better. Thank you.
Yeah,
And just to
just-
let you know, we need to start wrapping up in just a
Yes,
few minutes.
we are.
Thank you.
We are. Okay, so I'm just gonna go go on with the presentation. So this is the gimbal is facing down and the drone is going up. It's what we call a God's eye ascend or a bird's eye ascend. And here, all I want to point out is that the only difficult thing about this one was framing the lighthouse with the boat, and it wasn't even that difficult. It was a lot of fun. And the time of day, look how the light is coming from the bottom right-hand side, and how the different docks are actually framing the shot. But from the point of view of flying the drone, this one is a piece of cake. The only thing you have to do is make sure that you do it at the right time of day and that you frame things properly.
Yeah, and speaking of the time of day, the next shot, as you can see, this is a morning shot. So the water is very black because it's not lit. And you basically can see, it kind of pops the subject matter. And while we're on the subject, if you notice, there's a guy walking here on the upper right. And that's a good point too. When you do these things where you have really wide shots, you want to have some perspective in there. Have somebody walking, something that we can tell that it's not, it gives us some idea of what we're looking at, what the size is. And then it helps our brain adjust to the image. But these are all examples of different times of day. So
this one, actually, I wasn't going to include it, but I took this one yesterday. This is a shot of opportunity. We were doing something completely different near here. And then I saw this big ship that was leaving Baltimore Harbor. And I'm like, you know what? We're here, might as well get it. So I just threw this into the presentation, not because I think it's a particularly fantastic shot, but it's because if you see something that you can get, I'm going to recommend that you do get it, that you do go out there and you do your best to get it.
Oh, this is a great one. I actually shot this last week in Maine with a kite foiler. This guy's a world-class kite foiler, and he called me, and I've done some other stuff for him. So we went out there, and my whole point is it's really difficult to get these shots because you want to get close, which is basically you're underneath the parachute looking at him, but you got the strings in the way. My normal bailout for something like this would be to go up if he gets too close, but you can't because of the strings. So what you want to do here is you want some perspective again. And in this shot, it was the sailboat. So I saw him going towards a sailboat, and I chased him down. If you can go back on that shot a little bit, Luisa, we can see the sailboat.
Yes.
And it gives you a little bit of dynamic motion in the shot, because chasing him on the water with nothing in the foreground, it's really difficult. And at times he just gets ahead of me and I can't catch up. Which you deal with in setup and stuff and whatever, but when there's other things you can bring into the shot, it makes it so much more easier. I mean, we have other shots where if you're dealing with things like sports and things that are fast moving, you need to coordinate with them. You need somebody calling out, for instance, over the water. You need somebody calling out altitudes for you, so you're not flying into the water. I almost flew in the water a couple times here, but because the most dynamic shots again are low, because it gives you that motion and close to the subject. And again, it's very dangerous with the strings that are going actually to his kite. This is a very difficult subject to do. I mean,
it's a difficult shot and it's as is this one. So before, and I know you're going to talk about this one, Michael. This is our last shot. So we're almost done here, but I am going to insist that you guys keep all safety measures. There were a lot of things going on in here that could have turned pretty badly very quickly. So one of the things that we do whenever taking these type of shots is we have visual observers, we coordinate with the boat captain, we coordinate with the parachuter, and we have permission from everybody to do what we did. So make sure that you mitigate risks when you're doing these type of shoots, because they can be very, very dangerous.
Yeah, and this one here, for instance, we were working with them. Same thing with the kite foiler. I don't just go out usually. If I see them, I may, but for the most part, things like this, you really need to coordinate. You want to be working with for instance, the parasailer. We were actually on the little boat you see down there. and we launched from there. Yeah, it's because you got people on the parachute, you got the strings and stuff, you got but we're a long way from shore. But this is a good example too. One, it reveals, but again, when we reveal it, it's down below us, and then we ped down so the parachute comes up above the horizon, and then it just like pops. It gives it a great feeling.
All right.
Goes
So
up above the horizon.
let me just read the conclusion that the points that we tried to make is always know where the light is coming from. Use foreground objects to frame your shot. Use lines in your shot to help you with that framing. Shoot farther and closer to the subject, depending on where, what you're trying to accomplish. Bring a shot list with you and practice, 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 practice. So if you have any questions, please shoot us an email. It's Luisa or Mike at midatlanticdrones.com. And I'm going to stop sharing.